When we have to create object of a class, automatically this constructor function will execute, and the compiler itself uses new and delete operator whenever the memory requirement is there. There are three types of constructor: default, parameterized constructor, and one more is copy constructor. It does not contain any arguments, any values. Then it can be called as default constructor. Welcome back to one and all. Myself, Vasanta, lecturer in Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, Pre-University College, Temple of Excellence, Mysore. Today we are going to start with the second session of Constructor and Destructor chapter. Whereas in the previous session, already you came to know regarding the introduction of constructor. That is, constructor is a special member function used to initialize the object of a class automatically. Then rules to write a constructor function. That is, what are the major rules we have to follow while writing a constructor function. That is, class name and function name should be same. It should be declared in public section. It does not have any return type specifier, not even word also. And with that, it is not possible to refer the address of the constructor. When we have to create object of a class, automatically this constructor function will execute. And the compiler itself uses new and delete operator whenever the memory requirement is there. Then how to declare a constructor function? How to declare that? How to initialize that? Then you have studied regarding one example program regarding constructor. Whereas on today's class, you will come to know the types of constructor. Under the types of constructor, you have default constructor, parameterized constructor, as well as copy constructor. There are three types of constructor: default, parameterized constructor, and one more is copy constructor. Now one by one we'll discuss. The first one, default constructor. What do you mean by this default constructor? In default constructor, the constructor which does not contain any arguments. Any arguments it does not contain, that can be called as default constructor. For example, consider I am creating a class. Class name we are given as add. In this private section, we are declaring the variable, for example, int a. Then in public section, we are creating one function, add only. Here, if you have empty bracket, for example, a equals 0, I am initializing, then we are closing function, then we are closing class. If you have empty brackets here, after function name, if you have empty brackets, empty parenthesis, then it can be called as default constructor. Here, if you have arguments, for example, int x, then it can be called as parameterized constructor. And the last one, copy constructor, there we are using that copy constructor to copy from one existing object to another object. Whereas a default constructor is a constructor which does not accept any arguments. It means that it does not contain any arguments, any values. Then it can be called as default constructor. But when they come on parameterized constructor, the constructor that takes one or more arguments, it may contain one or more argument, then it can be called as parameterized constructor. Whereas the last one, copy constructor, using which copy constructor one object can be copied to another object. Already whatever data in the object, whatever initialization in the object, that we can copy from one object to another object by using this copy constructor. Three types: default, parameterized, copy. In default, it does not contain any arguments. In parameters, it contains arguments, whereas in copy constructor, copying from one object to another object. And when they come on advantages, the main advantages, especially in default constructor, how many objects you have created, all the objects are initialized by same set of values. For example, consider here it's a parameterized constructor. One more constructor will write default constructor, class, add only. On this, in private section, if you have, you can declare the variable. Otherwise, in public section, I am declaring the function add. here empty bracket, here I'm initializing, for example, x equals 0, then I'm closing this, then I'm closing the class. If you have arguments, then it is parameterized constructor. If it does not have any arguments, then it is default constructor. For example, in the main program, we are creating object. For example, in the main program, void main, here on this, we are creating the object. How to create object? By using class name we are creating. That is add, for example, here object 1 I am taking. Then one more object 2. Then semicolon. It means that how many objects here we have? Here we have 2 objects. Then in default constructor, what happens? All the objects are initialized by same set of values. How many objects we have? All the objects are initialized by same set of values. But in parameterized constructor, for each object, we can able to give different set of values. If I want, I can give for a equals 0 one time and a equals 1 another time, like that. How many values we want for each object, that many values we can able to give on this parameterized constructor. But in default, all the objects are initialized by same set of values. Here, all objects of a class are initialized with same set of values. And this one automatically it will execute when we want to create object of a class. It executes automatically when objects are created here. First thing, it does not contain any arguments. Here when they come on advantages, all the objects are initialized by same set of values. But here with that, it will automatically execute when we are going to create object of a class. But when they come on parameterized constructor, on that, for each object, we can able to give different set of values. For object 1, one value. For object 2, another value. For object 3, another value. Like that, for each object, we can able to give different set of values in parameterized constructor. All objects of a class are initialized with different set of values. Whereas here, same set of values we are initializing, whereas here different set of values we can able to initialize. And here also it executes automatically when objects are created. Automatically, if it is default or if it is parameterized or copy, there also when we have to create object, automatically it will execute. But here advantages, all objects are initialized by same set, whereas here for each object, we can able to give different set of values. And when they come on copy constructor, there also, it helps to initialize with the values which are already existing by an object. From one object to another object, we can able to pass the value here. We can able to initialize the value here. Whereas in the exam, you may going to get the question, what is default constructor? Write the advantage, disadvantages with syntax. Then you have to write constructor, default constructor definition, advantages, disadvantages, then syntax. If you write, then you will get 5 marks. In the same way for parameterized constructor also, definition, advantage, disadvantage and syntax. For copy constructor also in the same way they will ask. Write the definition of copy constructor, their advantage, disadvantage and syntax. Otherwise, you may want to get the question, what is default constructor? Explain with an example program. Or what is parameterized constructor? Explain with an example program. Or what is copy constructor? Explain with an example program. Like that, you may want to get the question in the annual exam. Whereas here one thing, actually you have to remember definition, advantage, disadvantage, syntax, with that one program for each concept. Now you come to know the definition, advantage. Now we'll discuss about disadvantages of default constructor. Already I told you, each object is not possible to give different set of values here. See, it is not possible to initialize with a different set of values for each object. In advantages also we used to say, all objects are initialized by same set. But when they come on disadvantages, it is not possible to give different value for each object. Now in the same way, here also in parameterized constructor, it is not possible to use it when initialized with same set of values. Especially parameterized constructor are not used when you want to initialize by same set of values. It is not used when we to initialize with the same set of values here. Whereas in copy constructor is not invoked explicitly. Whereas parameterized constructor can be executed implicitly, explicitly, as well as initialization at the time of declaration. By that, in 3 patterns, we can able to execute this parameterized constructor, whereas copy constructor cannot be called by using explicitly. Now you came to know the definition, advantage, disadvantages for all the 3 types of constructor. Next, when they come on the syntax, here class name, then in public section once again we have class name, but if you observe here, it contains an empty parenthesis. It means that it does not contain any argument. Class name as well as function name are same. It is declared in public section. It does not have any return type specifier. Like that, you can take all the things. But if you observe here, there is no arguments here at all. Then it can be called as default constructor. In the same way, for parameterized constructor also, see, in the syntax, class name we are given. In private section, declare the variable. But in public section, once again, class name int a. If you observe here as well as here, the main difference is, whereas in default constructor, we does not have any arguments, but in parameterized constructor, we have argument, we have value. Then here, we are initializing b equals a. That means a value will move to b. Then after this, here we are closing the class. Here also after this, we are closing this class. It means that here if you observe here, in this we have arguments. Here we don't have any argument. This is the syntax. Then in the same way, for copy constructor also, there if you observe class name, scope resolution operator, class name, then class name ampersand PTR. It means that it stores address of its own variable. Especially PTR, here it stores address of its own variable. That address is transferred here. That is copy constructor. It means that when you come on types of constructor, 3 types, default, parameterized and then copy. Default does not contain any arguments, whereas parameterized contains the arguments, whereas copy constructor is used to copy from one object to another object. Now we'll explain with one example program. If you observe this program, here in the same program, we have considered all the 3. That is, you can write the same program for default constructor also. You can write the same program for parameterized constructor also. You can write the same program for copy constructor also. For all the 3, you can write the same program. In the exam, if you get the question, what is default constructor, explain with an example, then you have to write the definition, you have to write this program. Otherwise, in the exam, if you get the question, what is parameterized constructor, explain with an example, then you have to write the same program. For copy constructor also, you can give the same example program here. It means that in the same program, we have written all the 3 concepts. Here, consider, now we are starting the program. First, we are included #include iostream.h. This is a supporting header file for cin as well as cout. Then, for example, I want to perform addition of 2 numbers. That's why here I given the class name is add. In private section, we are declaring the variable a, b as well as sum. A, b is the value which I want to input, and sum is the variable where I can able to store the result. Then, in public section, one function I am taking add. Class name is also add, function name is also add here. But here if you observe, empty parenthesis we are written, it means that it is a default constructor. By using single line command, you can mention that it is a default constructor. Because in the same program itself, we are combining all the 3 concepts. That's why properly you have to mention it is a default constructor. Here we are initializing sum equals 0. It means that now first I am just initializing sum equals 0 in the beginning. Now is it clear? That is default constructor. Next, one more function I am taking, add only int x as well as int y. This also one of the constructor. Here, which type of constructor here it is? It is parameterized constructor because it contains one or more argument. Whereas in this case, if you observe, it contains two arguments. Whereas this one is default constructor, whereas this one is parameterized constructor. Here in this, we are initializing, that is x value is a as well as b, y value will move to b. This is nothing but parameterized constructor. By using single line command, write down that, because in the same program only we are combining all the three concepts. That is x value will move to a and y value we are moving to b. This is parameterized constructor. And one more function we are taking, add only. Here add ampersand object. If you observe here this is a copy constructor. Add is the class name. Once again add ampersand obj we are given. It is a copy constructor. What we are doing in this function, object of a value will move to a and object of b value will move to b here. This is nothing but copy constructor. It means that in the same program we have default, parameterized as well as copy constructor. And one more is regular member function we are taking, that is calculation purpose void compute function. In this compute function, we are writing the statement sum equals a plus b. It means that we will store the value a plus b on the sum and we are displaying the value, that is sum equals sum. If you observe here, totally how many functions are there? Default function, parameterized function, copy function, and then one more is regular function, that is member function. Totally 4 functions are there. Whereas first function is opened as well as closed here, that is default function. And here parameterized constructor, here copy constructor, and this one is member function. But here if you observe, here we have opened the class, that class is closed here. To close the class, after flower bracket you have to put semicolon. Especially in this program, we have totally 4 functions. Default function, parameterized function, copy function, and one more is regular member function. Then if you observe the main program, here void main, add object 1. When I am going to write this without arguments, then this default constructor automatically here it will go to execute. Here no need to call this function once again separately. Automatically without arguments here it will execute the default constructor now. Then add, once again class name I written add object 2. If you observe here object 2 5, 10 we are written. It means that for the place of x it will take 5 and the place of y it will take it as 10. If it having 2 arguments, then automatically this parameterized constructor automatically here it will going to execute. When I am going to create an object with arguments, whereas in this case we are called this parameterized constructor by implicit call. Here this object when we create, parameterized constructor will execute automatically. Then how to call the third one, that is copy constructor. Here in object 2 whatever value we have, that we are moving to object 3. It means that object 2 value is copied to object 3. It means that in both object 2 as well as in object 3, it contains the same value because here we are using copy constructor. Copy constructor helps to copy the value from one object to another object. Then if you want, you can call the compute function with the help of object 2 as well as object 3 also, because both the objects contains the same value, object 2 dot compute function. Then this, especially this compute function, automatically afterwards it will execute. If you want, you can use object 2 as well as object 3. Then later on we are closing this main program. Now is it clear? Once again I am going to repeat all the things. Here if you observe, there are 3 types: default, parameterized, copy. Whereas in default it does not contain any arguments, whereas parameterized contains the arguments, whereas copy constructor use it to copy from one object to another object. Then here it does not contain arguments. Advantages: all objects are initialized by same set of values. Then disadvantages: for each object we are not going to give able to give separate value. Here advantages, for each object we can able to give separate set of values. When we come on disadvantages, it is not used when you want to initialize all the objects by same set of values. Here it helps to copy from one object to another object, whereas here it is not possible or invoke explicitly. And this is a syntax for default. This is a parameterized constructor and this is a copy constructor. Whereas this program includes all the concept like default, parameterized as well as copy. Now is it clear for all of you? Next class we will explain regarding how the parameterized constructor can be invoked, whether implicit call, explicit call, or with the help of initialization at the time of declaration by using assignment operator, on which format the parameterized constructor can be invoked. It means that how exactly the parameterized constructor can be called in three methods. One is implicit call and one more is explicit call and one more is initialization at the time of declaration with assignment operator. How to declare that, then how to write the program for all the three concepts, that we will explain in the next class. Thank you for all of you.